In October, the VE All-Russian Congress of the Russian Komsomol accepted the patronage of the Red Fleet. I remember posters on Moscow fences. Prepare your defense against the sea robbers of capital. Strengthen the Red Fleet. Komsomol district committees were literally bursting with the pressure of those wishing to respond to this call. When my friend Kolya Ovchinnikov and I found ourselves on the threshold of the room of the secretary of the Komovnichesky district Komsomol committee, he said, "Brothers, you're too late. There are no vouchers for the ships." And seeing how discouraged we were, he added, "There are only 2 vouchers left for the Naval Preparatory School. Do you want one? Think about it and come tomorrow morning." And to the next morning we came when the doors of the district committee were just unlocking. "Oh, how? Have you thought about it?" The secretary of the district committee greeted us with such words. "Well, it's good that you've decided to join the Navy. It's a responsible Komsomol assignment." When we got the vouchers, we couldn't feel our feet under us with joy. The district committee organized a farewell party at the Workers' Club. Having listened to the strict words of Komsomol precepts, we gave the honest Komsomol, not sparing no effort, to restore the fleet of the Republic, to carry out exemplary service. On December 24, songs about the sea and sailors rattled in the Lefortovo barracks. More often than others, "You sailor, beautiful in your own right, you are 20 years old," each of us thought the song was about him. On that day, in violation of any statutes, we were given caps, and for the first time we felt that we already belonged to the great brotherhood of the sea. That day the frost was under 20 degrees, and we, dressed in what we were wearing, in coats, overcoats, jackets, but all in new caps, stood on the Red Square and did not feel the cold at all. It seemed to us that the whole Moscow came out to see us off. To the meeting, scanty, harsh words of the orators fell into memory. Mobilization to the Red Fleet is not only a holiday for the members of the Komsomol, it is a test of revolutionary maturity. You must justify the trust of the Moscow Committee of the Russian Komsomol. The final revival of the fighting power of the naval forces of Soviet Russia depends on you. You must be ready to repel all attempts of the world predators to enslave the first worker-peasant state. In front of the Kremlin wall, almost in the place where Lenin's mausoleum is now, we took an oath, gave an honest Komsomol word to become real sailors. We marched along the sidewalk, and the song rang out over our column. An indefatigable orchestra played all the way to Kalanchevskaya Square. There were many people in the streets. We were seen off with kind smiles. According to the schedule, our echelon was to reach Petrograd in 2 days. The Teplishki with the inscription 1,000 poods, 40 men. 8 horses were thrown on the joints of the rails. There were 40 Komsomol volunteers in each car. The guys stoked the stove, smoked cigars, and sang songs from excess of feelings. The candle in the lantern was burning dimly, casting large trembling shadows on the walls. It was good to dream on the way. What it was, the sea, what ships were there. Many of us, myself among them, had seen neither. So the train stopped. We were terribly thirsty. There was no water, and we had had enough of wobler, which at that time often replaced bread and meat. Volodya Pereligin, Kolya Ovchinnikov, and I, wearing visor caps, went with a bucket for reconnaissance. We approached the locomotive and, having opened a tap in the tender, began to draw water. The engine driver was angry, but when he saw our caps, he got kinder at once, though he was surprised. And by what right is this? He knew that he was carrying new recruits, and they were not entitled to uniforms. "They gave it to us," replied Volodya Pereligin, "because we are Komsomol volunteers." Then the driver, smiling, invited us to the locomotive box and allowed us to draw water. The meeting turned out to be symbolic. The machinist was a former sailor and served not somewhere, but on the Aurora. He began to tell about his sea service and how he missed it. While we were standing in front of the semaphore, half a tender of water was gone. After us, guys jumped out of Old Teplishki and took several buckets of water. I had to unhitch the locomotive and together with the crew go to the water tower. "It's a pity, guys. My run is not to Petrograd," complained the driver. "When you see Aurora, bow from me." Petrograd met us with warm, not December weather, cheerful march of the orchestra and guard of honor of military sailors. We were walking along the crumbling snow of Nevsky. The arrows of my klesh, sewn from an old overcoat, held on to the soap, could not withstand it, soaked, and my trousers became like skirt. My brave appearance was preserved only thanks to a leather jacket, which had seen the sights with big splotches, bought a long time ago for my first paycheck. We were placed in Derabinsk barracks on the shore of the Gulf of Finland. We passed quarantine medical commission. After that, most of us were sent to Kronstadt and the 2nd Baltic Fleet crew for training. There remained a group of 35 people, consisting of those who had vouchers to the preparatory school. We had plenty of free time, and yet we still haven't seen the sea, though it was close by, and we hadn't seen the ships we dreamed of yet. And then the demon, Tempter Volodya Perigin, appeared. He started to excite us. Let's go to the port, to watch the steamships. We will approach on the ice. We can even touch them with our hands. Yeah, I'm an addition. You can rely on me. He assured us. Let's go. We're walking on the ice. Volodya is in the lead. I'm second. Third, Nikolai Ovshinnikov. And suddenly Perigin disappears. We can't understand anything. And he's in the water, or rather underwater. How we managed to pull him out, we don't know ourselves. We enter the barracks. It's already time for dinner. Now Volodya is behind us. I go first. On the threshold is the foreman, a tall uncle with a bushy mustache. He gives me a fiver, Kolya too, and Volodya too. We ducked inside. We tried to understand what the petty officer's gestures meant. Perigin, who knew everything, explained, "You'll be given 5 outfits to clean the latrines out of turn, and I'll get 10. So ended our first attempt to get acquainted with the sea and steamships. We thought that immediately after quarantine we would be taught seamanship, but it didn't turn out that way. The foreman comes and announces, "Tomorrow is the math exam, then you'll take Russian." It's like a thunderclap. Many people, though they had studied in schools, became despondent. If they don't get accepted, what a shame. And then there's the foreman calling, threatening me. "Andreev, you'll be in charge." Why me? Why me? Because it's the A word. It's the past, there's nothing to hide. Our knowledge turned out to be poor, and to put it simply, most of us were weak. There was something to think about. But then came the last day of the tests, the credentials committee. Everyone understood. This is the most formidable hour, to be or not to be in the fleet. Half a century has passed, but I still remember everything clearly. They brought us to Ekaterinsk barracks, where the school was located, who ran incessantly to the smoking room, who paced the corridor like a pendulum, who waited, as if frozen, with the most hopeless look. Others cheered themselves up with cheerful stories. My position is the most unfortunate, to be the first to go. I waited for my fate, pondering sorrowfully, at last, Andreev, to the commission. I go to the door. My heart wants to jump out. I feel that from the heat and excitement I turned crimson. The collar of my kerchief is choking me. I enter the room soaking wet. The commission is at the table. In the center is the chairman. His face is stern, but his eyes are warm. A former sailor of the revolution. I met them on the Volga in Samara. "Well, what are we going to do?" The chairman addresses me. I don't say anything. I think, now they'll point to the door and goodbye, fleet, and suddenly a question. "Will you study?" "I will." "Do you give your honest Komsomol word?" "I do." For many of us, the honest Komsomol word was a passing grade, and this word became the law of our lives. At that difficult time for the country, cadets were entitled to only 3/4 of a pound of bread a day. A third of the ration was given to the hungry. We could only survive on codfish soup. True, twice a week we were spoiled with millet porridge. It was cold in the barracks, and wood was a spen. It didn't burn without kerosene. In the evenings we chipped wood to heat the cubicles. We had a friendly team, and if anyone violated the laws of friendship, he was given a Komsomol drive at meetings and even in the smoking room. What is there a brig or outfits out of turn to clean the latrines? When your comrades tell you directly in your face who you are, you don't know where to put yourself. You can't lift your eyes from the floor. And the thing is that if you don't listen to the words of your comrades, if you don't correct yourself, then there will be no place for you in our Komsomol collective. Those who endured the conversation frankly and afterwards did not get embittered, did not close. The collective accepted him. That, as life showed, became a real sailor. Traditions of maritime brotherhood helped us thousands of times both in the pre-war and especially in the war years. We, the older generation of sailors, are happy to realize and see that the glorious traditions are alive in the Navy. that they are honoured, appreciated and kept. And now, living in Moscow, I miss the fleet and the sea a lot. It seems to happen to all old sailors whose life was spent in exercises and sea voyages. How many were there? For 46 years of naval service, probably several hundred. But the first one, 47 days, is especially memorable. Then we were baptized at sea. After passing exams, our graduating class of the Naval Preparatory School in the summer of the 24th year went for summer sea practice. We cleaned, scrubbed the ancient training ship Warrior, anchored on the Peterhof roadstead against the palace and rowing harbour. However, its machines were eyeshells. All the funds were invested in the restoration of warships, and our ancient Warrior, which once had sailing equipment, could not be taken care of. But there was something to philosophize over when you were given scrapers, hammers, steel brushes, so that, acting with diligence and in sweat, each link of the corroded anchor chain to clean, in the words of the bosun, who sailed on this ship back in the era of sail, to a shut like a devil's eye. We got used to life in shipboard conditions quickly. Maritime practice. In addition to repair work, weaving cranes from toy to multi-pood, simple and studded tracks and mats, watchkeeping, emergency and daily cleaning, as well as the indispensable cleaning of potatoes, mainly took place in constant many miles of runs under oars in dinghies and sailing. Teachers, Sukovsky and Gunnenfeld, managed to instill in us a love for the dinghy. In the 20s and 30s, the main means of transportation on every warship. We loved to go sailing in the fresh wind on the Six under the command of Gunnenfeld. We learned how to manage a dinghy from him, and even became prize winners in sailing races. We liked very much to go on a rowing barge, which was something between a rowing boat and a barge. It was extremely slender and easy to sail. We formed a team of rowing enthusiasts, sometimes having taken a part of the amateur orchestra. They set off on the Fontanka Nevka for a walk to the islands. They rowed powerfully and beautifully. The orchestra, though thin, played with all its might. Passers-by stopped on the embankments and waved to us. Nurchazikam. Every now and then our petty officer Gromov shouted and Gulchenok, the most left-flanked on the course, even in winter-time unusually swarthy, with eyes just like a real Galchenko. But even without a command we piled on so that the backs of our heads reached the knees of the rowers sitting behind, and the barge was rushing forward. The bow cut the water, and it foamed with white lace. Rowing lessons hardened us physically, developed great endurance, accustomed to collective labour, to work on the water in all weathers. No matter how hard we tried, but during the exercises on the Peterhof roadstead, Sukovsky's voice was heard through the megaphone every now and then. On the barge, bad, to the Milestone and Back. It's easy to say to the Milestone and Back. It means to go more than 3 miles under the oars. My arms are already buzzing, they're cast iron, but pull yourself together, shouts the dinghy foreman. This to the Milestone and Back was repeated until the wings of the oars began to wave flawlessly, the blades to pass over the water perfectly parallel, and our barge to go at the speed intended by the inexorable bearded Suikovsky. Suikovsky was once a senior officer of the cruiser Rurik. More than one C-word we whispered in our souls at his address. But we will tell about it a little later. After a hard day, we liked to gather in the evening on the tank of Warrior to sing and dance. Thanks to the efforts of Sasha Sigakyov, our common favourite and invariable Kapel-Dudkin, we sang quite well. One song replaced another. To Kalinka, as a rule, we danced. Polenishko was good at dancing, and Kolya Bogdanov, an inexhaustible invention, always told something funny, was able to portray in faces some funny episode. Never a dull fellow, a kind comrade. He knew how to raise the spirits of his friends. Our summer practice took place between Peterhof or Arnienbaum and Kronstadt. We did not go further than the big Kronstadt raid, and we could only dream of going up to a warship. We admired the battleship, cruiser and destroyers only occasionally, when we were lucky enough to visit Kronstadt. What was it like there, behind Tolbukin's lighthouse, the sea in the Gulf of Finland? What are the unknown islands scattered on its surface? What is Goglan, the island of brigands? What is it like, the Baltic Sea itself? That would be all to know, to see. This was romantically dreamed of in the night silence of the school, and of course in the amazing, enchanting with its beauty nights on the Peterhof roadstead. One day in June, shortly after the start of a dinghy drill, the signal was raised on the Warrior. Dinghies to return to the ship immediately. Each dinghy raised a flag, clearly seen, and all headed for the ship. The weather was almost calm. Why are the boats being returned? We came aboard the Warrior. The commands, all hands to hoist the boats. Having taken the ropes of the hoists in hands, stomping to the beat of the boatswain's tune, one by one, except for the working barge and the dinghy, the rowing boats were lifted. We gathered in the cockpit. The chief of the course, A.P. Lukovnikov, came and announced. That the entire third course is going on the training ship Komsomolets in the foreign campaign. The news was overwhelming. A friendly hurrah rang out. Everyone surrounded the father. I don't know anything else. Now we should quickly gather our personal belongings. In an hour and a half we should leave by train for Leningrad. We'll get the equipment at the school, and the day after tomorrow we'll go to Kronstadt to the Komsomolets. Having gone through the school of Batya, we knew how to carry out orders quickly and clearly. In a few minutes everything was packed. On a barge we were transported to the shore of the rowing harbour. From there, as on alarm, we went to the station with a quick step. We arrived long before the appointed time. We arrived in Leningrad at the Baltic station and walked to the school. We walked so fast that we were surprised. And after all, we had travelled halfway across the city. Handing in our things, getting new equipment, tableware, various allowances, money allowance due in a foreign voyage, purchasing personal toilet articles. The most important thing that each of us acquired was enamel badges with Lenin's portrait. Soon it turned out that a detachment of ships was going on a voyage around Scandinavia with visits to Norwegian ports, Murmansk and Arkhangelsk. The cruiser Aurora is going to be the flagship ship, where besides the crew there will be cadets of the Naval Command School. The second ship will be the training vessel Komsomolets, where besides the personnel of the ship there will be cadets of the Naval Engineering School and we, Prepavlovsky. On the advice of Vladimir Alfarov, our recognized poet, playwright, actor, and amazing storyteller, and with the permission of our superiors, we rushed to booksellers in search of Russian-Norwegian, Russian-English dictionaries and phrasebooks. Alas, for our almost 200 brothers got only a few copies of phrasebooks, and that incomplete. At last everything was received. Everything was brought and checked by Beatty himself. The belongings were put into sea suitcases made of tarpaulin. The last dinner was held, prepared by our cooks to the glory. The mood was the best. After lunch we put our suitcases on a cart and formed up. At the head with father we moved to the Neva. The weather is marvellous. As soon as we came out of the gates of the 2nd Baltic Fleet crew, we wrote, sing my song. Komsomol song. Look out, NT, we're going to the seas. So with songs we reached the Neva, loaded on a tugboat and sailed, with iridescent hopes to arrive quickly in Kronstadt and in full confidence that, as soon as we were accommodated on the Komsomolets, we would immediately go to sea and our first campaign in life would be not just any trip, but a foreign one. While, under the guidance of Sasha Sigachev, we were going through our vast song repertoire, the tugboat was already aiming its nose at the gates of the Kronstadt harbour. At the post at the entrance to the harbour a signal is raised, allowing our tugboat to enter the harbour. My eyes are looking for Komsomolets. Here it is, 3-tube with high, slightly bent-back masts, standing at the southern wall of the harbour. Not far away, at the same wall Aurora, at the sides of the ships. But it doesn't look like the ships are ready to leave. On their boards there are wooden arbors hanging by ladders, and the sailors standing on them pass from arbor to arbor loaded with navy prunes, coal sacks and baskets. That's the story. In the cloud of coal dust on this hot windless July day, tightly embracing the ships, was not going to part with them. The slender outlines and high sides of the Komsomolets, which had seemed to us before, if not the most beautiful, at least beautiful, were losing their attractiveness before our eyes. When our tugboat came to the ship's side, we, using the storm gangway, climbed onto the locker. We lined up on the deck, met our senior assistant to the commander of the ship Apostoli. He announced, "You'll be accommodated in the aftmost 8th cubicle. We are glad of your arrival, please get settled, and after dinner do not refuse to organize coal loading in 2 shifts, shift in 4 hours. Tomorrow you will be in charge of a part of the rowing vessels, Polyut and Lock, one side of the bollards, Polyut premises, and something else for their care." After that he turned to Lukovnikov and asked to keep in mind that besides the 4th hold the cadets would have to load coal into the 3rd hold, and maybe even into the 2nd hold. "I hope that the cadets, Komsomol volunteers, will show an example to everyone. Please be free." dressed all in white, wearing white gloves. Apostoli easily ran up the gangway and vigorously walked towards the tank. Our course was a fighting one, not shy. We had seen the sights and were not afraid of work, but the XO's tirade was like a cold shower on everyone. Romantic illusions were finally dispelled. We had to lift coal from the holds of the barges manually to a great height. We should reload coal into the holds, and not isolate it from the living quarters, where the coal dust would accumulate so much that it could not be cleaned in a few days. When the ship had special coal pits located around the boiler rooms, are we not going to transport coal to the north? But service is service. 9 days and nights we loaded coal into bottomless holds. It was especially difficult when lying down, as miners in the mines, with a shovel or even with their hands, we hammered coal into all corners under the very bottom of the hold, coal pit, so that during rocking the loose cargo could not move freely, and thus create dangerous rolls. At first, until we acquired the necessary skills, there was no number of bumps, abrasions, and other minor injuries. We all cursed the hot weather. The parched coal dust got into all pores, crunched on teeth, mixed with the sweat. In a word, they differed from devils only when they rinsed their faces and hands before eating, and for a short time became a little lighter. There was no sense, no desire, and sometimes no strength to wash properly. Having eaten, they hurried to stretch out on the deck without undressing. Yes, it's not easy. The Navy service. That's when the habit of great physical exertion developed during rowing lessons came in handy. Though it was difficult, but, especially in the hours of night chill, jokes were not silent. A good joke amused the soul during the work the brass band played without interruption. At last the loading was over. We took so much coal that it was enough for us and Aurora to go to Archangelsk, and we did not need to buy gold from the British. That's why we had to sweat for 9 days. Now we knew that we had saved a lot of gold rubles for the country by our labour. From the consciousness of this, the work did not seem so hard anymore. And troubles connected with the reception of all kinds of supplies came to an end. The bosun had filled his storerooms with the skipper's property, paint, and other necessities. The whole ship was most thoroughly washed. The davit sails, the canvas plumbings of the bridges, the bunk nets, the covers of the deck machinery, and the 2 small-caliber salute guns were washed. The ship was painted, shined, and stood on the roadstead as a sea dandy. One could fall in love with it. We were in love with our komsomolets. Everything on the ship was made by our own hands, and we were proud of it. Old naval clerk, seeing our work, attitude to business, recognized the komsomol as worthy guys and almost sailor. So tomorrow, after the flag hoisting, we leave for the campaign. Thinking, excitement, impatient, waiting today at the signal ship to watch. The commander, together with the XO Apostoli and the assistant, an old Mars Flots who had seen sails in the fleet, Vasily Efimovich Kalichev, inspected the whole ship, carefully checked whether everything was prepared in a marching way, fixed and stowed in case of stormy weather. At last tomorrow came. The day turned out to be beautifully weatherful. The crews of the ships in snow-white uniforms, caps with white caps lined up along the boards. In the morning silence, ringing melodies of horn players, accompanying the solemn raising of the flag, which is raised on the flagpole signalman. The red cloth with the white disk of the sun and its diverging rays. How beautiful is the flag of the fleet of the Revolution! Mikhail Vladimirovich Viktorov, the chief of the Baltic Sea naval forces, went by boat along the ships. On the Aurora he said goodbye to the commander of the squadron, said good words of farewell to the crew, wished them a happy voyage. It was given to stand down. The crew of the komsomolets went out, most of them to the tank to smoke and exchange impressions. Many of us smoked a pipe at that time. My classmate Mitya Sukharev, who had served on a destroyer before coming to the school, had a particularly good crooked pipe with a cap. Sukharev was the first to notice that the Aurora's call signs and the Dobro signal had been raised at the roadstead. "Now we'll take off the anchor," shouted Mitya joyfully. Indeed, the bells of the loud battle sounded, the horn players played, the watchman whistled into the bosun's horns. The commands were heard. A big gathering, stand to your places, take off the anchor. Everything was in motion. One could hear the windlass selecting the anchor. The crews of the ships leaving for the campaign lined up on the upper deck. Pictures of the neighbouring ships were also in formation, and signals were raised on the rails. "We wish you a happy voyage." On the main signal post, located on the roof of the fleet headquarters, the flag signal soared. The Chief of Naval Forces wishes a happy voyage. exemplary performance of the task. A band plays on the Aurora. She slowly turns around and the ship fairway goes west, into the sea. The Komsomolets is moving in her keel. The ships of the Red Fleet for the first time in history go on a foreign voyage. We, standing in formation, watch how the ships on the Grand Reed, Kronstadt forts and the golden dome of the Kronstadt Cathedral are gradually getting farther and farther away. We passed the cruiser Oleg, sunk in the fairway in 1919 after the attack of British torpedo boats, and soon parted on the countercourse with the Italian leader of destroyers Mirabello, following to Leningrad with a courtesy visit. The Italians had the crew on the upper deck facing us, as it is supposed to do when meeting warships. It is the same on our ships. The Mirabello looks fine, but the smokestacks are smoky, though not thickly, but smoky. There shouldn't be smoke on a warship. Aurora lowered the balloons, indicating the degree of the assigned squadron move. The squadron has increased speed to 14 knots. Almost all the free time idle on the upper deck. We look at the low islands Rodsher to Utas. By evening we approach the rocky island of Gogland with ruffled wooded slopes of frowning hills. The gloomy hulk really stood like an outlaw on the sea road. While telling us about this island, Ganenfeld threw a few silver coins overboard. To our surprised inquiries, he answered as follows. In ancient times, taking advantage of the convenient location of the island, the fact that because of the numerous shoals navigators were forced to lay their course near its southern tip, pirates successfully traded here robbery. It is necessary to placate Neptune with silver, so that he would get rid of robbers, did not give Stitoliti sailing ships. Belief is belief, but even now sailors, passing Gogland, throw coins into the sea. Long ago Gogland disappeared behind the stern, and more often we began to see laibs, schooners and transports. Some of them, forgetting about naval politeness, passed by without saluting the Soviet naval flag. St. Moritz was not designed to accommodate such a large number of people, so we slept not only in the cabins, but also on deck, on the hatches of cargo holds and on the upper deck. Our course was allowed to rest, to hold classes, and at night to sleep on the aft superstructure, the poyuta. How good it was to rest on the shelter in calm, cloudless weather. You lie there and see everything. You see the sky, you see the sea, lighthouses, lights on the shore. Oncoming transports, you can hear how the propeller blades are drilling the water, how it is churning and foaming behind the stern. It is good that your friends and comrades, with whom you have already eaten more than 1 pound of salt, are sleeping with the sleep of the righteous. In the morning we saw the northern tip of the gloomy Dago Island and a huge white lighthouse on our left. So, the detachment was already leaving the Gulf of Finland. A day later the ships passed the southern tip of the Swedish island Gotland and headed for the Big Belt Strait. Foreign transports met more and more often. They politely saluted our flag. Only the British stubbornly did not notice our presence in the sea. Apparently, they could not forget that in the fight with the Red Baltic Fleet, English fleet lost in the Gulf of Finland many warships and had to retreat. Sailors of the majority of merchant ships, especially of Scandinavian countries, welcomed us, waving hats, towels and even small red cloths. The Great Belt is the deepest strait in the Baltic, with many ships coming to it from all directions from the North Sea and the Baltic Sea. Between Germany and the Danish islands there are railroad ferries, which are known to run with the precision of a well-paced clock. Along the narrow, winding fairway of the strait, a wide variety of ships are moving simultaneously, either towards each other or crossing courses. Although there are many beacons and distinctive signs on the shores of the strait to ensure safety, still sailing here requires great skill and endurance from navigators, commanders and captains. Frankly speaking, seeing all this picture, dance of flashing lights on the shores and kaleidoscope of running lights on sailing ships, we marveled at how navigators, ship's commander and watch officers understood all this, and our group, without reducing speed, confidently moved along the confusing labyrinth of the fairway. Performing duties of messengers of the watch commander on the running bridge, we got respect to navigators who are on their feet day and night, occasionally take a short nap on the clumsy sofa of the navigator's cabin, and again to work. They are bearing notable places on the shore, or by celestial luminaries determine the place of the ship in the sea. And so day after day during the whole campaign. We especially liked the senior navigator Dmitriev, a little snub-nosed with an oak-lady beard and surprisingly expressive eyes. He was a Russian man to the bone, sparing no effort for the good of the cause. By morning we had passed the strait. The colour of the water changed noticeably. It became greyish-bluish, and in the North Sea, emerald shade. The Norwegian fjords, about which everyone had heard so much, were not far off. Nikolai Ovshinnikov and I organised a general washing of working clothes. Volodya Perigin came up, smiled meaningful. You work hard? Well done. I praise you for your diligence and intensive expenditure of physical energy, but I've entrusted this dirty work to the sea ocean. In an hour, please go to the cockpit, where the achievements of the ingenious mind and diligence of the sea element will be demonstrated. An hour later, before going on watch, we gathered in the dressing room where Volodya conducted his experiment and gave explanation. Our soapless washing requires no physical labour. You need only 3 things. 10 metres of thin line, 1 dirty work pants, 2 1 porthole, 3, and most importantly, 1 inventive head. Got it. Wonderful. May I have your attention, please? Our Odessian was a master of funny things, and we were anticipating something interesting. Volodya came to the board, opened the porthole with a gesture of a fakir and started pulling the wet line from overboard with a look of a winner. It was strange for us to see how easily the line went. The face of the winner gradually darkened with anxiety. At last all the line from overboard was picked out, and at its end, instead of working pants, dangled only rags. All the rest was washed away by the water and carried away with it. We laughed together. The trick had failed. The fakir was left without pants. The boys went to the tank, where songs and laughter were coming from. To the funny stories they usually told there, they could now add one more, and I headed for the narrow metal gangway leading far down to where the huge boilers with hot furnaces were. The stokers, black with coal dust, were always bustling around them. One boiler was ours, a Komsomol boiler, and the cadets were responsible for it. We kept watch here, learned to wield a shovel, a crowbar and other, though not simple but the heaviest tools. In sweat we learned to keep steam on the mark. On the red line, the foreman of the watch, a stoker, a participant of the October Revolution, an experienced sailor who had served in the Navy for more than a dozen years, met me very cordially. He shook my hand so much that it crunched. Come on, Komsomol, feed the hatchet, he said. I opened the door. The unusual heat hit me in the face, and began to throw coal with a huge shovel into the furnace humming from the whirling flames. It was my first shift in the boiler room, so I didn't know exactly what to do and how to do it. Don't hurry. You'll still have time to exhaust yourself, the stoker instructed me. Sprinkle it evenly, or you'll put out the furnace. From the heat, dust, and unusual work, I soon felt that the shovel was getting heavier with every throw. Look, you're doing a good job, encouraged me old spirit. But you see, the steam still crawled under the red one. We need to break the crust. I took a long, heavy crowbar and, gathering all the strength that I still had left, put it almost entirely under the thick crust of melted coal. To pull the crowbar back out, I began to jerk it up and down, but the crust would not budge. He piled his whole body on it and hung on the crowbar like on a tourniquet, dangling his legs. The stoker laughed till he cried, and I was angry at this stubborn crust, and at my inability, and at my weak strength, and at the cheerful foreman. What's your name, Volodya, you say? He asked, smearing tears on his cheeks. In the end, I, looking at him, smiled too. He taught me how to hold a crowbar, how to break off a small piece from the crust. After the shift, damn tired at the boiler furnace, I climbed up the gangway, went to the upper deck, greedily breathed in the delicious fresh air. For all my life I remembered the first watch in the campaign at the operating boiler, when I experienced the full weight of sailors' labour, respect to spirits, and all sailors was forever ingrained in my youthful soul. There are no mountains in the Baltic. Islands in the Gulf of Finland mostly have low shores covered with coniferous forest, and many of them are even bare, only stones. Denmark, we looked at it while passing the belt, is as flat as a table with only some left. The steepest remained for us the Pulkovo Heights, which we observed from the window of the carriage, passing from Peterhof to Petrograd, except for guys from the Far East, the Urals and the Caucasus. Most of my peers had never seen mountains except in pictures. Can you imagine how we were struck by the huge height of the granite shores of Scandinavia, as if from the sea itself, coming out into the Atlantic Ocean? Our detachment began to stay close to these magnificent in its power granite ridges, mottled with valleys, which passed into a tangle of fjord skerries, from where suddenly, as if from under a rock, fishing schooners jumped out, steamships appeared, which seemed tiny shells against the background of high shores. Here it was beginning, that extraordinary unknown so long expected, that wanderings bring to a man. We did not notice when the water became bluer. The blueness was emphasized by the foaming waves that arose from the movement of the ship's hull. The ocean breathed measuredly. Yes, yes, it was breathing, and on its bosom it smoothly raised the aurora, then slowly and carefully lowered it, and we on the Komsomolets, as mesmerized, looked at it. However, we did not have long to admire all this. The wind grew stronger, and then, whistling like bandits in the gear, it began to rage at all. It turned the ocean surface, rocked it, painted the crests of the waves with water splashes. The water boiled with marble foam. A storm. While we were still in the Baltic Sea with wonderful weather, we dreamed of getting into a storm to fight with the elements, to see what a pound of fury. That was romance. But now the deck goes out from under your feet, and you fly along it as if you were running under a mountain. And then the ship gets up on its haunches and you have to climb the deck, raised by a huge ocean wave. The ship falls into the abyss and shakes from the impact with the water. There is a place for the water to run wild. It floods not only the upper deck, but also the bridge, all the ship's superstructures. Predatory tongues of waves lick everything that is not securely fastened. Barrels crack. If you hesitate a little, you will be swept away like a splinter. The rogue waves, trying to look into cargo holds, try to tear tarpaulin covers off the hatch covers. And the waves are so high that sometimes you cannot see the aurora, only masts stick out. It's very difficult for a man in such weather, so much so that many people pay tribute to Neptune until exhaustion. Truly rightly in people say, the sky will seem with a sheepskin. It is especially hard for stokers and machinists. At times you can feel how the nose of the Komsomolets rests against the water wall. The backed stern trembles from the work of the naked propellers rotating at breakneck speed. But the stormy day and night passed. The morning is better. Tomorrow, the Port of Bergen. And today the ships are having a big cleaning. The coal stock on the upper deck is reloaded into coal pits. Everything is cleaned, washed, scrubbed and scrubbed with the utmost care and diligence. We are in charge of the floor, so we are also in charge of cleaning. Kapustin, a cadet of the Naval Preparatory School, orders me to go to the Assistant Commander Vasily Efimovich Kalachev, take a note from him and bring green soap for washing, paint and rags from the box. When I addressed this request to Vasily Efimovich, he "What? Does he need soap? Why didn't you stock up from the evening? Isn't that an order? We have to tidy up and they're only running around for soap and rags. Take a note and tell your petty officer that you can't let such rascals not only in the navigator's cabin but also in a decent galley." The duties of the assistant included the organization of watch service, supervision over the maintenance of the ship's outer hull, the condition of the spars, rowing vessels, cleanliness and order on the upper deck and in the inner rooms. Vasily Efimovich was, if not an exact, then extremely close to the original copy of the very Purity Ivanovich, which was so movingly described by K. Yim Stanukovich in the story Vasily Ivanovich. Day and night Purity Ivanovich with enviable vigour chased his botsmaniat, all who were not diligent in observance of naval orders. Sometimes he would get loud and give out bosun sayings, but nobody took offence at the old man. Everyone knew that Vasily Efimovich had nothing in the world dearer than the fleet, and he served the fleet not for fear, but for conscience. There is nothing more joyful for him than to see the Komsomol members become good sailors, and to make the young men become navy men sooner. It is necessary to ask them strictly, and Vasily Efimovich asked them not by a small measure. The detachment is approaching the Bergen fjords, which cut, like huge canals, for many miles into the land. The ship's fitting out is in full swing. Long ago, having diluted green soap, they washed the painted surface of the whole aft part of the ship. The wooden deck has been sanded more than once. Everything seems to be normal, but probably because here, in the aft part, everyone who enters the ship gets the first impressions about the order on the ship, and everything here should look floatily beautiful. Vasily Efimovich sees faults everywhere. Boris Kalishev orders Pochikovsky, "Lay the cable of the ladder beam hoists properly." "Have you seen it?" Boris winks at us slyly. The Sea-Wolf is fierce. See, at last everything that the storm has done has been fixed. The bridge, the whole ship shines with blinding whiteness of tarpaulin covers, boat covers, covers of deck mechanisms and cable vyushkas. Komsomolets is ready for any parade. The ships entered the Bergen fjord, squeezed by high mountains overgrown with forest. We go sometimes as through a gorge. Norwegians from their fishing schooners cheerfully greet us, our ship, our flag. Shots of gun salute of Aurora rang out. Salute of nations is answered by the coastal battery. On our ships, the crews on the upper deck in the front, the minutes of the salute are solemn. Excitement clenches the throat. We are witnesses of an unprecedented event. The world's first salute of a foreign power to our naval flag, our country of Soviets. One more turn of the ship, and suddenly the most beautiful bay and amphitheatrically located city and port opened before us. The town is small, but almost burgundy-coloured tiled roofs and pleasantly coloured low buildings nestled under the mountain and on its slopes are pleasing to the eye. On the road steered elliptical-shaped motorised boats with slightly bent upward bows and stern. A lot of yachts, like swans, float on the emerald surface of the bay. The manoeuvre setting all of a sudden, giving up the left anchor, the detachment performed flawlessly. Gangways were thrown overboard, davits for dinghies were fired, watercraft were launched. We have only rowing ones, and on the Aurora also the only steamboat in our detachment with a shining copper pipe. So detachment was met by the representatives of our consulate and local military commanders who arrived from Christiania. That was the name of the Norwegian capital at that time. They came to visit the Aurora. Then followed return visits of the squadron commander to the local civil and military authorities. Before leaving for shore, the commissar assembled the squadron. He said, "The honor of the Soviet flag must be kept high. You understand that yourself. Anything can happen ashore." The malignant bourgeois press long before our arrival wrote about us all sorts of nonsense and nasty things. Barbarians, sailors accustomed to murder and violence. Some rascal wrote, "Mothers, take care of your daughter. That's what sons of bitches can be in the world and what they can do in their anger. Remember, there's plenty of white trash in these parts. Now you can go back to shore. Show what a sailor of the Red Fleet means. What he is, a Soviet man. Those leaving for shore, line up," commands the watch commander. The ship's duty officer goes around the formation and scrutinizes everyone. Everything is in order. Pants are ironed, uniforms and cap covers are shining white. Belt plaques are polished so that you can comb your hair while looking at them. Nary to those who quit, to the barracks. The clatter of heels zip down the left gangway. In each barge there are 50 quits, 18 rowers and a helmsman from the duty shift. They rowed for glory. It was July 15. On the harbour wall to which we are approaching, a hefty crowd of Norwegians. Some of them are waving their hands in greeting. There are also many who look not only with curiosity, but also warily, as if expecting how these terrible Soviets, about whom they write in the newspapers, will be. Here is the crowd parting in front of the disembarked. Here, smiling happily, an elderly man approaches me, obviously a worker in one of the chocolate factories for which the city is famous. He extends his hand and shakes mine firmly. Excited, I pull out from under the lapel of my flannel shirt a badge with the image of Ilyich and pin it to the stranger's jacket. "Lenin, Lenin, Lenin," Rhea came from the crowd of Norwegians surrounding us. Hands reached out to us to receive the expensive relic. The ice of wariness was broken. We gifted souvenirs to old and small, young women and ubiquitous, like us, children. We saw how carefully Norwegians accepted from us these enamel portraits of Vladimir Ilyich, and we realized how great is the love for Lenin among the toilers of the whole world. Lenin opened the way to the hearts of Norwegian workers, fishermen. The crowd had already broken up into separate groups, each of which surrounded one of my comrades who had come ashore. We were eagerly asked about the Soviet Union. Norwegian, English, German, Russian words could be heard in the multilingual clamour, although we had a phrase book, but it was an old one, and it did not contain many things. We found fishermen who had been to Murmanskport many times in pre-revolutionary times. They knew a little Russian, with their help, and when we got stuck, then using international sign language, we got acquainted with local people. It is believed that harsh nature, constant struggle with the elements, struggle for means of subsistence and existence made Norwegians silent, their speech, not fast, expressions of feelings, restrained. But today the cold northern temperament has noticeably warmed up. Surrounded by children, our small groups of 2 or 4 people went to explore the city. The narrow streets running away into the mountains from the town square, which lay near the port, were shining with cleanliness. The sidewalks were paved with granite and diabase, clean houses, neatly dressed people. Our volunteer guides, boys, took us first of all to the central square where the bank, foreign exchange office, town hall, city offices, church and police department are located. After a tour of the square, the meticulous boys showed us several stores selling pipes, tobacco, Norwegian knives with dial handles, and, from a fibre suitcase to a traditional blue sweater, everything necessary to equip sailors going on a long voyage. After a good deal of scrambling through streets and squares, we made our way along the widest street to the foot of the mountain. On its slope from the building in front of which we were standing, a wagon, similar to a competition, was crawling upwards. Another was coming down to meet it on a rope. A group of our sailors came out of the station building. "Why are you surprised?" One of them called out to us. "It's a ropeway, just like in Nizhny Novgorod. Pay 10 yeriks, sit down and ride. There is such beauty from above. You don't want to go down." Let's go inside the building. Having collected a coin from each of us, the guides buy tickets, and after some waiting we are in the carriage, which could fit a dozen or two people. We crawl up we go, and indeed a marvellous view opened up. Below is a huge bay surrounded by high mountains. Malachite water is marvellously transparent. On its surface are ships with large parade stern flags waving look very spectacular. Snow-white yachts are dancing around the ships. Seen on the shore on the right smokes factory chimneys. In the distance the mountains go away. Where we stopped there is a wide plateau covered with meadow grasses. Silence, warmth, just grace. People sunbathe, do gymnastics, run, play soccer ball, and some, making themselves comfortable, read. The boys dragged us to an improvised sports ground where young Norwegians, athletics enthusiasts, were exercising. A few more groups of our guys also raked here, 15 people gathered. There was also our 33rd class foreman, Sasha Storozhenko, an excellent gymnast. Let's see, Sasha came to the Norwegian, who had just pushed the cannonball, and gestured for permission to try. "Well, what's up? I've never done the shot bit before, and now I'll be ashamed of myself." Sasha bravely took the cannonball and, although the Klesh was in the way, managed to send the cannonball to a mark close to the Norwegian one. "Russian is good. Good. Third. Cheers." "Sasha, don't let up." We encouraged Storozhenko. The competition was on an equal footing. The hosts began to kindly invite us to take part in their training. Time flew by, and if one of us hadn't realized it in time, we wouldn't have been able to get pipes, tobacco, Norwegian knives, and would certainly have been left without dinner. In a word, having stocked up with all the above and adding a hefty bag of cocoa, we barely made it to the last barcade. Immediately on arrival, our ships were surrounded by dinghies and motorboats. The Norwegians listened with apparent pleasure to the music of the maritime orchestra and choral songs. On other evenings than the Norwegians on the water, on the dinghies, and we on the tank sang our songs together. They especially liked Kalinva and Metelitsa. Thousands of Norwegians visited the ships. Working people got on our barcades, the better off, on their own motorboots. Except for the engine rooms, stokers, and artillery cellars, they inspected everything. They tasted and praised our navy food. We marvelled at the order on the ship, freedom and simplicity of relations between superiors and subordinates. Everything was opposite to what the bourgeois press wrote before our arrival. More than one of the Norwegian communists who had been on board enthusiastically told us something like this. The majority of the population of the city, seeing the sailors dressed in fine uniforms, their immaculate behavior, polite treatment, admire you communists with your arrival have helped us a lot in the party work, in the struggle to help the first state of workers and peasants in the world. The Auroravites passed on that our ambassador Alexandra Mikhailovna Kolontai, being with them, gave the highest assessment of our stay in Bergen. She said, "You have performed a miracle. A day after your arrival, even the fierce press had to write about the excellent condition of the ships, excellent military alignment and impeccable behavior of the crews. Red sailors do not visit hotspots, do not spend time with girls of free behavior, do not start fights. The best friends of the Russians are Norwegian children, surrounded by whom the sailors spend their time walking around the city." On the Aurora, Kolontai, on behalf of the Soviet government, awarded the Order of the Red Banner to some cadets of the Naval Command School who showed courage at Fort Paul in 1923. The Bergenians greeted us in a friendly manner. Our, though hastily assembled, soccer team beat the local one. After the match, both teams were photographed together. On the third day of our stay, the flagship appointed rowing races of all categories, from 6 and above. The commander's dinghy on which we, the cadets, were rowers, headed by the rower Sasha Storozhenko, and the commander, Vasily Efimovich Kalichev. In the evening we prepared the rowing boat. We raised it on hoists above the water so that it would not get wet. The races were to take place after the flag was hoisted. By this time a lot of Norwegians had gathered on their dinghies not far from the ships. We agreed among ourselves that at the wake-up signal we would all run to the davits, on which the Gitchka was hanging overboard, launch it into the water, check the leg rests once again, and put on the last navy gloss. No sooner had the wake-up call sounded than we rushed to the davits, and then our surprise was unbounded. The dinghy was already launched. The nicest Vasily Yefimovich himself was tidying up in it. When he saw us, he grumbled. "Why did you come here at the crack of dawn? What? According to the timetable, everyone is supposed to knit bunks, wash up and have tea, and you've rushed here. It's good that you're worried about the lifeboat. That's the Matros way. But there's no need for you to linger here. Everything will be done neatly without you. Off to tea." And the boats gathered on the right transom of the Aurora. From the start they had to leave by categories, first Vel boats, then sixes, then rowing boats, and last of all barcases, rowing dreadnoughts, as we jokingly called them. Our category of dinghies starts first. The most experienced, strongest rowers are on the dinghies, especially on Dinghy No, one from Aurora where the rowers are gunners. They had no problem to throw heavy, about 30 kilograms shells on the charging station for hours during artillery exercises, and the other teams were not weak. Ready? Warriors. Everyone brought the oars with blades to the bow, eye to the water. A cannon shot rang out, and the most beautifully fast-paced race began. The pace of rowing was like that of an academic boat. We were a little slow at the start. The Aurorians took advantage of that and pulled ahead by almost a couple of hulls. "Not so you. Come on," shouts Vasily Yefimovich, broom sprinkling us with overed water. We push as hard as we can. Our arms are filled with lead from the tension. It seems that we are catching up. The pace is frantic. It seems that the oar is about to fall out of our hands. We are approaching the Komsomolets. The whole crew is on the starboard side. Hundreds of voices shouting. "Make on, pile on, push. Komsomoltsi." Yeah, we got the Aurorians after all. Now we're in line with them. Alternately, they and we break ahead. Finally came, as sportsmen say, the second breath. It became easier to breathe. The muscles of our arms were freed from the leaden weight, became elastic. We pile on as if less, and the Jitka flies like a swallow. Everything will be decided by the turn, which must be made around the stern of the Komsomolets, who will make this turn on less circulation, the one who will get ahead. They passed the bow. The middle of the ship flashed by. Vasily Efimovich is sitting on the stern. Leaning his whole hull to the beat of our rows, "No, come on, Eagles. We'll leave these gunners without mustaches. Push as hard as you can." But what's that? Our geik is running right under the stern of the ship, because now we'll break the blades of the starboard oars, and if it doesn't happen, we'll fly to hell together with the oars. And suddenly we hear, "Starboard oars on board. Bend over." We executed the command with lightning speed. The enormous aft chock instantly hovered over us. Gitchka, steeply turned to the right, jumped out from under the ship's starboard into the water. "Row so that your vertebrae crunch," cheerfully orders our commander. The gambling risky, but wonderful Naga Vasily Efimovich. At the turn the Gitchka broke far ahead, and now we will not give up our superiority. Something unimaginable is happening on the Komsomolets. They shout, "Hooray! Well done! Well done!" Cooks together with galley workers ran out on deck, pounding into empty copper pots and pans. The Norwegians are shouting something from their boats. What? It's unclear, but probably in sporting excitement they cheer up. "Let's go again." Sasha commands. "Rowing to class?" We push with all our might. All oars as one, wave like gull wings, bend in an arc. In rowing we fall back so that our heads are almost invisible. We pass the stern of the Aurora, from the side of which the applause is carried. Norwegians are applauding and again shouting something from the boats and dinghies. Gitchka is finishing rapidly, from the signal bridge waving a flag. We come first. The orchestra is playing tush. Nerdrains the oars, commands the happiest of the happy Vasily Yefimovich. The kindest smile shines on his ingenuous face. Fefimike is no less sweaty than the rowers, who are ready to carry him in their arms to rock him. But, alas, you can't do it on a dinghy. In our eyes there is both admiration and gratitude. If it weren't for him, we probably wouldn't have been the first to arrive. Hiding a satisfied grin in his mustache, Efimix says in a calm voice. And you guys seem to be all right, and the good of you, it seems, will come out of you. If always in the service, as in this race, we'll try. And in general, you're good to good. I'll give you a second portion of compote, Zagrebnoi. Why don't you look well? Look, on the Aurora our call signs are raised and some other signal. Vet he, Buki, Vuki, you, Frolov shouts. Hurry up and raise the clearly I see flag. Give me the dinghy book. Let's understand the meaning of the signal. Yefimich reads aloud. The flagship declares special thanks for excellent rowing. Oars on the shaft. As soon as the oars of the Gitchka were candlelit, the signal was lowered on the Aurora. Dry the oars. We lowered the oars, holding them horizontally above the water. Oars on board. We lowered the oars along the sides of the barnacle, and now we became spectators of a fascinating spectacle, the race of rowing boats. Komsomol boat under the 14th number, staffed by Prepevalovites, also distinguished itself, winning in its category of D. After the races, each prize winner received a token according to the place taken, and the commander of our ship was awarded a silver cigarette case by the flagman. After this ceremony, all the dinghis returned to their ships. In the cockpit, the winners of the races were greeted perfectly, only we began to descend the gangway from the upper deck, as Nikolay Bogdanov, surprisingly similar to the voice of the senior ship's bosun, commanded, stand at attention, and bravely report us. Comrades prize winners, the cabin is in order, the tables are set, the champion's dinner is ready, please come to the table. The noise orchestra was beating out the bars of Encounter March on aluminum bowls with spoons. An improvised choir led by Sasha Sigakyov received Says in Tadlachum Sim Sima and Jutland battle, Trafalgar, Tsu Sima and Jutland. Amid the general merriment, no one noticed how Lukovnikov entered. From surprise, Nikolai froze in the pose of Sweek, with a hand attached to the empty, without a cap, head. The scene was so comical that the father smiled. We, his pets, could not refrain from laughing. Now you, the winners, are solemnly welcomed by your friends and comrades. You can hear on the whole roadstead, and a fuse from the commander of the ship is surely provided. I praise you, you didn't fail. But what do you care? The most important thing is Vasily Yefimovich. He shook up the old days and cleverly led you to the prize. I hugged him for joy, and you didn't forget to thank the old man. You were right to say thank you. You comfort his soul, caring for the young people of the fleet. Tears of the days of the anchorage were running out. In the evening on the harbour wall, we said a touching farewell to the Norwegians. And in the morning of July 19, accompanied by numerous motorboats, our detachment left the Port of Bergen. Ships gradually developed full squadron course. Motorboats began to lag behind. And now we can no longer see the Bergenians waving us goodbye. We reached the Lofontaine Islands, accompanied by flocks of dolphins. It was strange to see how the sun disk stubbornly did not want to sink into the sea, and, having touched the horizon, began to rise again slowly. It's a marvellous picture. On the right, the dark silhouettes of islands, and on the left, the unset sun reflecting from the ocean surface. The pulse of the ship's labour life is rhythmic. Every 4 hours, the watches change. We, the cadets, are on watch in the engine room, at the boilers, auxiliary mechanisms, on the signal bridge, in the wheelhouse, in short, everywhere where the Red Fleet. We serve on a par with the regular crew, practically learn the hard work of sailors. To become a good sea commander, it is necessary to know not only the technique, but also the labour of subordinates. This wonderful and wise rule has become a law in our fleet. During the campaign on the ships worked schools of the first and second stages, in which the Red Fleet and junior commanders acquired the necessary knowledge. During the campaign, more than 40 of the most active Komsomol members were accepted into the party. Mile by mile the ship measured off, keeping the way to the north. Once Sergei Tikhonov, who was serving on the upper deck, shouted into our cabin to our cab, "No, guys, there are whales on the horizon." In a flash, everyone found themselves on the upper deck, climbed higher on the superstructures, so that they could see further. And indeed, fountains are coming out of the water on the left. 1, 2, 3, 4. The fountains are approaching our group. It seems that a whole family of whales, attracted by the noise of the ship's propellers, hurries to satisfy their curiosity. At times the dark backs of sea giants can be seen together with the fountains, 2 of them. Obviously, the most daring came closer, up to them some 300, 400 meters. Having raised their fountains twice, they turned away and gradually disappeared in the distance. We are approaching the northern tip of Europe, Cape Nordkaup. It is noticeably fresher. You can't go to the upper deck without a coat. Nordkaup is gloomy and deserted, and the sea is deserted. Rarely see a hard worker, a fishing trawler under the Norwegian, English or Dutch flag. Our trawlers do not meet at all. The detachment is moving in the eastern direction, keeping the course to the Kola Bay. We are sailing in the harsh Arctic Ocean. From the ship we can see the granite bare shore almost without vegetation. In the Kola Bay we anchored not far from Murmansk port. As a matter of fact, there was no city and port as such. The invaders, British and Americans, leaving, destroyed and burned everything they could. Almost nothing remained of the city built during the First World War. The inhabitants rebuilt wooden buildings. The whole town is wooden with unpaved streets. Port docks, usually without covered warehouses, without harbour cranes. There are not even 10,000 inhabitants. Our arrival became a big holiday here. Almost all residents of Murmansk visited the ships. On the coast spent a few evenings with the townspeople, with the Komsomol organization, which had more than 600 people in its ranks. The brass band of the detachment played, the ship's amateur performances. We had fun, having missed our native places and voices from the bottom of our hearts. Everything would have been good, but mosquitoes got us. Not mosquitoes, but big mosquitoes we had never seen before. They attacked us in clouds, survived from the upper deck, forced us to sleep in exhausting heat, in cabins with closed portholes without it. There was no escape from them even there. We were especially harassed during the transshipment of coal from the holds of the Komsomolets to the Aurora. The heat was unbearable, everyone worked half undressed, sweat was pouring down in streams, and the mosquito armada was at ease. Having finished the coal strike, we had time to visit Alexandrovsky, where at that time there was a wonderful biological station, in the aquariums of which there were all kinds of mollusks, jellyfish, sea urchins, and fish of northern sea latitudes. What only colours and forms of the underwater world was not here? Countless number of. In Murmansk, on the second day after our arrival there, I distinguished myself so that I could earn several days in the brig. In free time, wishing to get acquainted with the city and its surroundings, we made up a team under the leadership of the commander of the department, Ali Frolov, and on a rowboat went to Murmansk port. To get to the port for us, 14 rowers with rower Sasha Storoshenko, was not a simple matter. We quickly moored at the wall. Some of us, while everyone was looking around the city, had to stay on the boat to guard the watchman. Who was it? And suddenly Misha Romanov, an artist with whom we often spent hours working on the wall newspaper, suggested, "Let the watchman be the one who caught a bream while rowing." That caught a bream was me. By my mistake at the end of the row, the oar blade got stuck in the water. Because of this, the oars of several other rowers got tangled. I was embarrassed. There was no other way. The guys supported this suggestion unanimously. It's a shame, of course, but what can you do? Everyone left. The sun was burning mercilessly. I was tired of sitting in the boat, having fastened the oars as it should be, and laid the bollards. I tied the spars with sails to the banks and got out on the wall of the port, the territory of which was piled with heavy bales of Egyptian cotton. I was fascinated by the spectacle of the port movers' work. People were working skillfully, harmoniously. It was a sight to behold. The human soul always rejoices when he sees beautiful labour, extraordinary power. Having seen enough, I went for a wander along the piers. I reached the railroad station. In a word, when in 2 hours I came back to the place where our boat was fixed on the bow and stern, I was horrified and could not understand what had happened here during that time. The boat was not afloat, but hung on the bows, tilted so that the barrel for fresh water, wooden scoops for pumping, oars, spars, everything was about to fly over. At the sight of such a picture, I was numb, all wet. My heart was beating frantically. I tried to untie the line, but the knot was so tight that my strength could not manage it. What do I do? Trouble is imminent. I pull one or the other for line, but it's no use. In utter despair, I'm running along the wall, and suddenly I hear a voice. "Why are you running along the wall like a lynx in a cage?" I turned around and saw 2 loaders resting on the bales. "I'm in trouble, help me," I shouted with all my might. "The dinghy is hanging. Everything is going to fall out of it." 2 loaders of great stature, taking their time, got up and came over. Realizing what the matter was, They laughed, quickly climbed into the boat, took hold of the running ends of the falinas, pulled hard, and before I knew it, the boat was plunged into the water with a loud splash, and my rescuers, having fastened the falinas, got out on the wall. What kind of a sailor are you, if you don't know that you have to pull the moorings when casting off? You shouldn't be sailing on the sea ocean, but in a lousy pond, said one of them. Why are you standing there like a mute stump? If you're assigned to the business, you shouldn't be on the sea. What kind of a disciplined, good seaman are you? If you go AWOL and leave your post, get into your own boat, check that everything is in order, and stay there until you are replaced, said the other, an older man with a slight greying in his beard. Keep your eyes open, keep your mouth shut, and tie up your loose ends in time. When the tide comes in, the moorings will be loose, so it's time to pick them up, the first one added sarcastically. My ears were burning. I climbed into the dinghy and did not leave it until the guys came. We stayed in Murmansk for 6 days, having bathed to our heart's content in the lake, having drunk enough on the shore only sailors appreciated, tastiest, coolest, not smelling of bilge iron water. After a farewell evening connection with Murmansk youth, we left for Arkhangelsk. Due to a large draft, the ships could not use the Severodvinsk fairway, but anchored near Mudyug Island. This island became notorious during the years of intervention. Commissars, Bolsheviks, sailors, Red Army soldiers were tortured, tormented, hanged, shot there. Women and children were not spared. Here at the roadstead, we had to fill all the holds of the Komsomolets with coal, stock up on provisions and everything that is required in the marching life. We visited Arkhangelsk alternately, in several shifts. The hydrographic vessel in the morning after the flag hoisting, having taken on board the dismissed, left for Arkhangelsk. There we had 8 to 10 hours at our disposal. We returned late at night on the same ship. As a token of friendship, the people of Arkhangelsk presented the crew of the Komsomolets with an amusing little bear cub. Bear immediately became everyone's favorite, surprisingly quickly got used to the ship's life, firmly grasped the daily routine. No sooner the bugler plays the signal dinner for the crew, the bear is already at the galley, and he is the first to be given a cooled good piece of boiled meat. Having had a snack, the little Toptigian comes down from the upper deck and starts to scamper around all the cabins. When we start to drink compote, he comes to our 8th cabin, where there is nothing further than the stern. Once the watchman Andrei Krestovsky, having seen the bear with the most serious look, announced loudly to the whole compartment, Mikhail Soloviev, your brother has arrived. What brother? I have no brother. And even if I did, you can't walk on water to the raid. How come the guest? Indeed, the bear waddled to Soloviev, who was sitting on the cargo hatch cover. Children without reason, that people say. Children and animals always feel a good man. So it was not by chance that the bear cub came to Soloviev. On August 7, almost a month after the beginning of the campaign, the ships anchored off Mudyug Island and headed back. On the return voyage, our detachment from Arkhangelsk was to call at the Norwegian port of Trondheim, and from there, without calling anywhere, to return to Kronstadt. At the approach to the throat of the White Sea, the weather began to deteriorate, and then it became stormy. It got colder. There were rain and fog charges. Ships were shaking like shells. I liked to keep watch in the engine room at the operating mechanisms, but during the storm it was very hard there. All the skylights were closed, the doors on the bulkheads were shut tight. Ventilation. Through ventilation sockets, which are deployed so that they do not flood, and through them seawater did not get into the engine room. And the temperature there is over 40 degrees. From steam, overheated engine oil, bilge vapors, the air is stale. There is nothing to breathe. It shakes so much that it's hard to stand on your feet. You can either get under the machine's connecting rod or poke your fingers into the working mechanism. Especially nauseating in the corridor shaft, through which passes the shaft of the main machine, lying on many bearings. Each of them is lubricated with oil and cooled with water. To be on watch at the bearings in this corridor, where you have to crawl through, bent in 3 legs, and where there is no inflow of fresh air, infernally hard. Even in normal conditions, maintenance of operating mechanisms requires great physical strength, dexterity, and endurance from machinists. And even in stormy conditions, there is nothing to talk about. They had to show maximum ingenuity and skill to lubricate bearings and everything that requires lubrication in time, to regulate the machine speed, especially at those moments when the rocking exposed the propellers. Almost all the way back, we fought the storm. The closer we came to the meridian of Nordkap, the stronger the storm became. And as soon as the storm subsided a little, the ship held emergency drills to fight fire and water. They scraped their hands, learning how to fix holes, put plasters on them. The commanders insistently wanted us to understand. Hard in training, easy in battle. When we were young, of course, we grumbled. Only later we began to realize the benefit of such training. Especially useful was the severe school of training crews for operations in difficult conditions during the Great Patriotic War. Soon the detachment entered the Norwegian skerries and began to move along the fjords, stretching almost through the whole Norway along the meridian. Now we cared little about the weather. The fjords were quiet and graceful, but navigators and commanders had a lot of trouble here too. It was not easy to understand in time the intricacy of the fairways washing thousands of islands to find the one that leads to the goal. And during the day the task was very difficult, but at night it was 100 times harder. We sailed without pilots, not on the beaten paths, but confidently without hindrances due to high navigational culture, exemplary navigational training, for which the fleet of our country has always been famous and is famous. The further south we go, the more picturesque the shores become. The more forests there are on them, the more often we pass by small, just a few houses, fishing settlements. The more we meet boats either leaving for fishing or returning with the catch. The main fairway is located so far inland that no breath of the sea, even in the fiercest storm, reaches here. On a sunny day, the mountains are reflected especially beautifully in the mirror-like surface of the water, so this landscape can be admired for hours. On August 12, the detachment was on the roadstead of Trondheim. Again, as well as in Bergen, we were met by representatives of the Soviet legation. Our ships were surrounded by motorboats and dinghies crowded with people. Trondheim is situated in a valley of a picturesque river. There are many factories and plants in the city. In the harbour, on the wall to which our dinghies approached, a huge crowd gathered. We were greeted cheerfully. No aloofness, no airiness. There were many workers, communists among those who greeted us. Strong handshakes, questions, only time to answer. Local communists invited us to the club. More than 300 sailors of the detachment marched in formation under the orchestra with songs to the working club. On the streets again crowds, in all open windows smiling faces. At the solemn meeting there were speeches with warm mutual greetings. Then the concert began. A thunder of applause broke out after every song sung by us. We really sang with an extraordinary rise. The wonderful evening ended with the singing of the International. Everyone stood up and, holding hands tightly, sang. The powerful sounds of the proletarian anthem, the anthem of loyalty to international friendship, flowed. On the day of the soccer competition, which we had agreed upon, we went to the stadium. Once again, we passed through the whole city, again onto the orchestra, but now in even bigger composition than the first time. On the soccer field, our soccer players were thoroughly beaten. Deciding to take revenge for the defeat in Bergen, the Norwegians strengthened their team with several players of the national team and, of course, won the match with a large score. After the end, both teams hugged each other and took pictures again. The Norwegians gave our players memorable gifts. The Norwegians express their friendly disposition in everything. For example, in the windows of many stores hung posts, "Come in, they speak Russian here." On the first day of discharge, having gone around almost the whole city, having examined stores where various sea souvenirs were sold, which seemed even more interesting to us than in Bergen, the 5 of us, Ovshinnikov, Peregin, Alfarov, another preparer whose surname I have not remembered, and I, into having become hungry, began to look for a place to have lunch. On the square, not far from the fish market, we liked a cozy restaurant. Immediately the waiter approached our table and gave us a menu in Norwegian. What should we do? The smart waiter brought a second copy, in English. It's already easier, now we'll figure it out. We ordered dishes almost at random. To our surprise, the waiter brought us a decent-sized glass vase with excellent hot potatoes. Everyone looked at each other perplexed, whispered to Alfarov, who was explaining himself to the waiter. "What did you order? Why do we need potatoes? It's enough on the ship." Meanwhile, the waiter brought capacious porcelain cups with fragrant, clear as a tear broth, and a tall vase with dried thin tortillas. These are the kind we use to cut noodles at home. We had to start lunch, but they didn't give us any bread. I had to send Nikolai to the bakery 2 houses away. He came back quite quickly, but instead of bread he brought a loaf with raisins, similar to our kulich. It turns out that Norwegians' bread is too expensive, so they don't eat much of it. For lunch, they serve fried potatoes and thin flatbread. There are no bakeries. But in pastry shops, they sell muffins, cakes, and pastries. To the surprise of the Norwegians present, we allowed the muffin bread and proceeded to lunch with gusto. The broth was destroyed in a flash. The waiter put on the table a dish filled with pieces of perfectly cooked meat, again with potatoes, but this time fried. We drank coffee with milk, finished the kulich and had it. After getting the bill and paying a relatively small amount of money, we went to continue exploring the city. Communication with local people pleased us, and sometimes touched us to the core, but time was running inexorably fast. The hour of parting came. Our shift again carried the service of duty rowers, and we could see once again how crowds of Norwegians were saying goodbye to the Soviet ships. Handshakes, hugs, and even tears. But now the last barcade has departed. We row to the ships. Farther and farther away is the harbour wall. People don't leave. They are from the shore, we from the barge are waving to each other caps, brims, handkerchiefs, hats symbolically clasped in a firm handshake. Goodbye, Norway. Goodbye, dear new friends. The last stage of the long-distance trek has begun. All of us had grown up noticeably, got used to the rough sea ocean, and began to bear its stormy rattle more easily. It was my turn to take the helmsman's watch, or rather, the helmsman's handmaiden, i.e. to keep watch together with the ship's regular helmsman. The weather was calm, and if at times the wind picked up, it was not difficult to determine what position to give to the rudder to keep the ship on a given course. Peter Kiselv, the senior helmsman, patiently initiated me into the wisdom of his art. On the rudder comes the voice of the watch commander. Yes, on the rudder. Do not trot, more precisely keep in the keel of the Aurora, keep her masts in line. Yea, keep in line, Selev answers for me, diligently working the helm. Where are you going, Gardenhead, shifting the rudder so much? There is no wave now. How did I explain to you? Gradually, little by little, put the rudder, then the ship will not yaw. The Aurora's masts are clearly visible, and steer so that they are in line as one. Do not accelerate the bow of the ship. Strive that the bow always goes closer to the windward side of the windward jet. Then we'll be all right. Steering her ship seemed to me a difficult matter. But after half an hour of my independent watch, from working with an impressive helm and from the understanding of responsibility for the ship, for maintaining the honour of its flag, I was pouring 7 sweat, and having changed in 2 hours, I clearly understood. Oh, how hard it is to stand such a watch, and not for nothing it lasts not 4, but 2 hours for helmsman. When the time of shift change came, Kisev and I came to the navigator's cabin. Now is the newly minted helmsman. Junior navigator, asked Kiselv. Nothing. He got used to it quickly. Good. Take over and you can rest. Why did you shine like a month? Kiselev cooled my joy. A lost cause if you ever think that everything is finally understood. We're here, but in the Navy, if you want to make a good job, forever put a proverb on your nose. To be a master, do not forget the science. If you forget this science, you won't be a master. Since second day, we are sailing southward to the Baltic Straits. Stormy chattering is still chattering. And for a man, as well as for the majority of animals, it is an unnatural state, the one who assures. Storm is not a storm for, or even worse, I can't handle everything in a storm. Even better than in calm weather is, to put it mildly, drawing as the rocking is exhausting. To fulfill in such conditions the duties assigned to you, you need will, ability to make yourself work, to adapt to unusual, most difficult situation. Now I told you what the watch at the helm is, but the helmsmen work in the wheelhouse. What is it like for signalmen on the open bridge, which is flooded by the wave in a storm? They are constantly being doused from head to toe. Already in the first minute of their watch they are soaked to the skin. But it is even more difficult for the stokers, who have to stand with a shovel of coal on the wet iron sheets, slippery as ice. This time, however, the worst of all was the bear cub. The poor thing couldn't find a place to stand. In the end he disappeared, and only after a day the stokers found him in the ventilation vestibule, holding on to the bars of the grate with his claws. Lying on it, the unfortunate one was catching refreshing jets of air with his mouth. The Baltic Straits were already calmly entered. The sun even shone over the Zund Strait. The wind had become lazy and barely fluttered the flags. There was no excitement at all. In the narrowest part of the strait both shores, Danish and Swedish are perfectly visible to the naked eye. In the Swedish city, you can distinguish white and blue streetcars. Navigating through the strait has its own, more stringent requirements to the navigator. The fairway is winding, there are many shoals and other navigational hazards. Depths on the fairway are small. Our navigators here coped with their tasks brilliantly. During the return passage, we were glad to see that more and more often oncoming foreign ships recognized our flag in time and saluted it. It seems that good fame spread about our campaign. It was the 45th, the last day of the first foreign campaign of the Red Fleet ships. Everyone who was free was on the upper deck. Kotlin Island appeared on the horizon. We passed the floating receiving lighthouse, Go Ship Fairway. It's the crews of both ships in formation. On the cruiser plays orchestra. Approaching the big Kronstadt roadstead. Hello, motherland. Hello, cradle of the Russian Navy. The campaign is over. The first Komsomol miles have been passed. There were almost 5,000 of them. At the main roadstead post, a signal was raised. All the flagships rehearsed it on their rails. The Chief of Naval Forces congratulates the cruiser Aurora, the training ship Komsomolets with a safe return from the foreign campaign, and announces gratitude. We began to prepare for our return to the preparatory school. The mood was high, know our people, we are already sailors. In our cubicle there were troubles on handing over the ship's things, and everyone was tinkering with their simple household. The air was buzzing, as if a swarm of bees was rising from a hive. There was an exchange of impressions and lightning-fast tweaks, and at that very time Vasily Efimovich came to us. You are making noise like a flock of senseless crows on a bush. The assistant of the ship commander said to us good-naturedly, Isn't that the sailor's duty? There is no fire back, so there is no need to hurry. Still young and green. We surrounded Vasily Yefimovich, listening to him. He always tells not only interesting but also such necessary things that you can't even read about in a book. I know, youth likes to make a fool of itself. I was like that myself, continued Kalachev. But I also know this. Seafarers of the Russian fleet always glorified the motherland with their exploits. I know that our Red Fleet should be an example for the whole world. So I came to you, our hope, to you who are being trained as fleet commanders, to tell you something from the whole sea-soul. First of all, never get your nose in the air. No matter what a man does, no matter what he achieves, he can always do better, achieve more. This is not my opinion, but people's wisdom. As soon as a man imagines that he is smarter, more skillful than everyone else in the business, then do not wait for him to be of any use, and there will be no trouble. In the campaign on the sea ocean, you had plenty of salty. You felt the weight of sailors' labor. Now you know how hard the service of a sailor is. In a few years you will become commanders, chiefs. Maybe not small, but always respect the sailor with heart and soul. For this he will repay you with love. He will rescue you from trouble. He will not spare his life. Finally, listen to the advice of an old sailor. If you become chiefs, don't dream about ranks, but take care of the assigned business with your soul. Work with joy, not sparing your strength. And these very ranks will come to you. I like you, Komsomol members, you are to my liking. I wish your sea life to be no less than 7 feet under the keel and clear our stern. Well, I'll be off. I've got some hectic business to attend to. Vasily Yefimovich went to our neighbors, and somehow we were quiet at once. That heartfelt word had touched our souls. We all remembered Vasily Efimovich Kalachev forever. We also remembered his simple but popularly wise orders to us, his marine grandchildren. The last day of our life on the Komsomolets came. The watchman's tune sounded, followed by the common. Cadets of the preparatory school to line up on the locker. Quickly we were lined up. Our father on the right flank, Senior Mate Apostoli, appeared. He addressed us with a short speech. You and I have successfully completed the historic campaign of the Red Fleet. You, future commanders, have plunged into the first salty fonts of the sea. You yourselves have been salted in the sweat of hard fleet labor. A word soaked so much that finally everyone to decide. To be or not to be a fleet commander, I think that the campaign for all of you was a good school and a good test. You passed it with honor. You served with zeal. The honor of the ship did not disgrace. All the chiefs are satisfied with you. Study with the same zeal with which you worked. I wish you success in mastering marine sciences. Comrade Chief, of course, the tugboat is on board. The cadets can be loaded. As always, emphasized out, Apostoli trumpeted, took quick steps away to the cabin. Lukovnikov gave the command. We loaded our belongings without fuss skillfully. We switched to the tugboat. The hard-working Shavinik fell off the board of the handsome Komsomolets and, puffing the smokestack, quickly ran to Leningrad, where our native school was waiting for us. Everyone thought about the fact that the hour of parting with him was approaching, and about what awaited him ahead. In the campaign, I liked most of all the watches in the engine room. I was conquered by its size and power, working diligence of all pistons. Moths, their labour diligence, I will not hide. My dream was to get to the engineering school. But, alas, it did not come true. After returning from a foreign campaign in the fall of the 24th year, we graduated from the preparatory school, began to be distributed among naval schools. At that time, there were only 3 higher naval educational institutions in the country: Naval Command School, Naval Engineering School, and Hydrographic School. Most of us, including me, were sent to the Command School. On the day of graduation, the order was announced in front of the formation. So goodbye to my dream of being an engineering. Each of us was given an order, in which it was written, in which school to arrive after the end of the vacation. For now, vacation,